I did not go to the lake to find my son. If you had asked me that morning, I would have told you I went because the ice was finally thick enough, because a man my age needs a reason to get out of the house, because the world is too loud and the lake is quiet. I would have said it like a normal thing, as if the last 15 years had been normal. But when the day ended, when I sat by my fireplace with a stranger's footprints melting into my entryway rug, I understood something that unsettled me more than any miracle. Some part of my life had been waiting at that lake the entire time. Even after the rescuers showed me my boy's leggings, torn and stiff with mountain mud. Even after the search captain stopped meeting my eyes. Even after the priest's voice softened when he said, "You must accept what you cannot change." Even after my wife's hands started trembling in her sleep. 15 years of acceptance, and still my body took me to the ice as if following a map only grief can read. The man was standing at the edge of my fishing spot when I looked up. At first, I thought he was one of those drifters who wander in from the highway, looking for warmth or an easy theft. Our county gets them sometimes when winter squeezes hard. He was too thin, his coat hung wrong, expensive once, ruined now. He wore a scarf high over his mouth and his hands were bare, red and split from cold. He held a small metal cup like it was a shield. He didn't wave. He didn't call out. He just stood there, watching me, eyes fixed in a way that made the hair rise on my arms. I remember the sound of my auger handle creaking when I shifted my weight. I remember the small popping of the ice under my boots. I remember thinking, "Do not turn your back. Do not reach for your knife." Then the wind moved his scarf, and I saw his face. I knew those eyes. Not the exact shape of his nose, not the fullness of his lips, not the angles a boy's face loses when he becomes a man. Those things change. Time edits people. But eyes do not lie to a father. They were the color of frozen creek water with a pale ring at the edge, the same eyes that used to watch me from the top bunk and ask whether thunder could break the house in half. My throat closed and my voice came out raw. "Ethan?" He flinched at the name like it was a thrown stone. That was the first wrong thing. My son used to grin when you said his name. He used to complain about it too, in that way teenagers do, but the name never scared him. This man's shoulders rose as if expecting a blow. He stared at me for a long moment, lips moving slightly under the scarf. And then he said, very quietly, "I don't know." I stopped breathing. It felt ridiculous, standing there on a frozen lake with a fishing rod and a bucket, asking the world to hand me back what it had taken. But I heard myself anyway, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "It's Dad," I said. "Ethan, it's me." His eyes flicked over my coat, my gloves, my hat, down to my boots, then back up to my face, as if he was reading a uniform. His gaze landed on my hands. I saw something in his expression then that made my stomach tighten. He was measuring whether I was safe by the way I used my hands. "You're cold," I managed. "Come sit. Warm up. I've got tea." He hesitated. His breath fogged the scarf. He took one step forward and the scarf slipped lower, exposing the corner of his mouth. There was a small scar there. A pale hook. My son got that scar at 11 when he insisted he could ride his bike down the hill without using his hands. He ate gravel and cried in a way that made him furious with himself. I cleaned the cut and he swore he was fine. And then he asked if the scar would make him look tough. Seeing it on a grown man's face felt like seeing a ghost carry a childhood token. I forced my hands to stay open. Slow movements. No sudden reaches. I poured tea into the metal cup he held out with a trembling grip. His fingers were cracked, knuckles split. There were faint bruises on his wrists, rings that looked too familiar from stories I never wanted to believe could be true. He drank quickly, then stopped, as if realizing he was being watched, and forced himself to sip slower, polite like a guest. "What's your name?" I asked softly, and I hated myself for asking because a father should not have to ask his own son that question. He stared past me toward the tree line. I don't know, he said again. People called me different things. Different things. 15 years disappeared, and all I could see was a boy being stripped down to whatever name was convenient for the people around him. I swallowed. Do you remember anything? I asked. He hesitated, and I saw his jaw tighten like he was bracing for punishment. Pieces, he said. Not like a story, just sounds, smells. Tell me, I said, gentle as I could make my voice. He took a breath. Pine, he said, wet wool. Someone whistling, a bright light in my eyes, and a woman's voice saying, It's not him. Like she was angry. My chest tightened. A woman said that? I asked. He nodded once, small and sure. That line keeps coming back. I stared at him, trying to press the fragment into the old winter that had swallowed my son. There had been another missing teen that week. I remembered the radio chatter, the overlapping search zones, the second set of parents clinging to hope and grief like drowning people. 2 families, 2 missing boys. A storm that erased certainty. Come with me, I said. My truck's close. Heater, food. No one has to know yet. Just warm up first. His eyes flicked around as if expecting someone to step out of the trees. No uniforms, he whispered. I won't call police, I said. Not unless you want me to. I just want you alive. He stared at me so hard it felt like he was trying to see into my bones. Then, after a long moment, he nodded. All right, he said, barely audible. I packed fast, but I kept every motion obvious. When I reached for my knife to cut the line, his shoulders snapped tight. I froze, lifted my hand away, and waited until his breathing eased. Then I did it slowly, like demonstrating to a frightened animal that you are not a threat. We walked across the lake toward shore. The ice groaned under us, that deep settling sound that used to scare Ethan when he was little. He tensed at it, the same reflex. At the bank, snow was deeper. He stumbled. Instinct grabbed me by the spine and I caught his elbow. He jerked away like I'd burned him. I'm sorry, I said quickly. I didn't mean to. His eyes dropped to where my hand had touched him. Something in his face shifted, not memory, not comfort, but recognition of a feeling he didn't trust. You're warm, he said, almost accusing. I'm dressed for it, I replied. He looked at my clothes like they were proof of a life he had been excluded from. In the truck, when I turned the heater on, he flinched at the rush of warm air like pain. He held his cracked hands to the vent, then pulled them away, unsure if he was allowed to accept comfort. I drove with my eyes mostly on the road, but my attention never left him. He watched everything outside the window with tense focus, tracking cars, scanning shoulders, reading shadows. At the red light by the general store, his gaze snagged on the old family photo in my dashboard corner. It was my wife and my daughter and her husband and my 2 grandchildren. Ethan wasn't in it. The photo had been taken after he vanished, after the family learned to frame joy around an empty space. He stared at that empty space as if he could feel it. When we pulled into my driveway, he didn't move for a moment. Inside, I said quietly. Just inside. He followed me up the steps, eyes on the windows, the yard, the line of trees at the property edge. When I opened the front door, warm air and the smell of soup rolled out, and he stopped like a man stepping into a different climate. It smells like a kitchen, he whispered. It is, I said, and the simplicity of it hit me like a wave. He stood too close to the fireplace at first, hands out, soaking heat with a hunger that made my throat tighten. I fetched clean sweatpants, thick socks, and old sweatshirt. When I offered them, he stared at the fabric like it was rare. You can change in the bathroom, I said. There's a lock. His head snapped up. There's a lock, I repeated. You control it. He nodded once, took the clothes, and disappeared into the bathroom. I heard the click of the lock. I sat at my kitchen table with my hands flat on the wood and forced myself to breathe. I wanted to call my daughter immediately, to scream into the phone, to hear someone else confirm this wasn't my mind breaking. But I remembered his fear of uniforms. I remembered the bruises on his wrists. I remembered the way he measured my hands. So I waited. When he came out, he looked both older and younger at once. The clean clothes softened him, but his eyes were still hard in places, guarded. His hair was wet from washing. His face, without the scarf, showed the lines life had pressed into him. He stood in the living room as if he didn't know where to put his body. "Soup," I said. "You hungry?" He hesitated. Pride fought need. Need won, barely. He nodded. I set a bowl and bread in front of him. He ate too fast at first, then noticed me watching and forced himself to slow down. His hands shook slightly, not just from cold, but from strain. "My name is Thomas," I said. "So you know who I am?" He paused, spoon hovering. "Thomas," he repeated, as if testing the sound. "You used to shout it when you were mad," I said. "Your mother said it made me sound like a judge." At "your mother," something closed inside his face. "My mother," he said slowly, and the words sounded unfamiliar on his tongue. "Yes," I whispered. "Claire." He stared at the soup like it might show him a picture. "I see. Hair," he said. "Long, dark, hands, a ring." My wife used to twist her ring when she worried. I had watched those hands for decades. I swallowed hard. "That's her," I said. His eyes filled and he blinked hard, angry at himself for it. "It hurts," he whispered. "We don't have to do everything tonight," I said. "We go slow." He ate another spoonful, then asked, almost in a rush, "How old am I?" The question hit like a hammer. He knew something was wrong with time. He needed it named. 29, I said softly. "You were 14 when you disappeared." His spoon clinked against the bowl. His breathing changed, quick and shallow. He stared at his hands like they belonged to someone else. 15, he whispered. "Yes," I said, and my voice broke. 15 years. He covered his face and made a sound that wasn't quite a sob, more like a man trying to swallow a scream. I didn't touch him. I let him have the space. I stayed in the room like an anchor. When he lowered his hands, his eyes were wet and fierce. "Why?" he asked. "Why didn't you—" He stopped, ashamed of the accusation. "Because I couldn't find you," I said. "Because the mountains didn't give you back. Because they told us you were gone." He stared at the fire, jaw tight, as if trying to build walls inside himself. That night, he chose the couch. He wanted the open room, the exits. I understood. I sat in my chair until his breathing evened out. I watched him sleep like a man watching a candle in wind. At dawn, I made eggs and coffee. The smell brought him out slowly, blinking like he'd been pulled from deep water. For a moment, his eyes darted around with panic. Then he saw me at the stove and relaxed slightly. He sat like a guest, hands folded, waiting for permission. "Eat," I said. He did. When he finished, he wiped his mouth carefully and asked, "What happens now?" The question carried fear, but also something else. A thin thread of hope he didn't know how to hold. "Now we get you checked," I said. "Doctor first. Warm is not enough. We do this right." "No police," he said, immediate. "I'm not calling police to punish you," I replied. "You haven't done anything wrong. But we need paperwork. We need proof." He stared down at his hands. I took a breath and said the next thing anyway. "I'm going to call Megan," I said. "Your sister." His head lifted sharply. "Sister," he repeated, as if the word was a key he didn't know what door it opened. "Yes," I said. "Her name is Megan. She's a mother now. You're an uncle." His mouth opened, then closed. His eyes turned glassy. I don't know if she'll want, he started. She has wanted you, I said. Every day. I called her from the kitchen so he wouldn't feel cornered. When she answered, her voice was normal, impatient with sleep. Dad? What is it? Megan, I said, and my throat tightened. You need to come over. Right now. Silence sharpened. What's wrong? She asked. I stared through the doorway at my son sitting rigid on the couch, listening with that hunted focus. I found him, I said. Another silence, then a sound like her breath catching. Who? She whispered, even though she knew. Ethan, I said. He's here. She made a broken noise. No, she said. No, Dad. Don't do that. I swear, I said. I swear on Mom's grave. Something crashed in the background. Then her voice came back ragged. Don't let him leave, she said. Please, don't let him disappear again. I won't, I promised. She arrived too fast, tires crunching hard, car door slamming. She ran up the steps like she was chasing her own life. When she entered the living room, she froze. Ethan stood slowly, eyes wide, panic rising like a tide. Megan stared at him as if her brain was trying to reject what her eyes confirmed. Tears ran down her face unchecked. Ethan, she whispered. He swallowed. I don't, he began. It's me, Megan said, voice trembling. Meg, you used to call me Meggie. His brow furrowed. His gaze flicked to me, asking for help. It's your sister, I said softly. He looked back at Megan, searching. Then, suddenly he spoke as if words had been yanked from him. You had braces, he said, and you chewed your pencils until the wood split. Megan covered her mouth and sobbed. Yes, she whispered. Yes. She stepped forward slowly, and when she wrapped her arms around him, he stiffened like a man expecting pain. Then, after a moment, he lifted his hands and touched her back, cautious as if touching a hot stove. His face crumpled. He made a sound that turned my stomach because it was grief and relief tangled together. Megan whispered his name over and over like she was stitching it back onto him. The doctor's office was a small clinic in town. I chose it because it was quiet and because I knew the staff. I called ahead and asked for discretion. I said, "He's frightened," and left it at that. We brought him in through a side door. Megan sat close but didn't touch unless he leaned. I stayed on his other side, a solid presence. The nurse took his blood pressure twice because it was too high. Her eyes lingered on his wrists. She didn't comment out loud, but her expression changed the way professionals' expressions change when they see something they recognize but wish they didn't. The doctor, a calm woman with steady eyes, listened without interrupting. She checked his pupils, palpated the scar line at the back of his head, asked him to follow her finger with his gaze. He flinched at touch, even gentle touch. Old head trauma, she murmured. Possibly more than one incident. Ethan's jaw tightened. We'll do blood work, she said, and imaging, and I want a DNA test. Ethan's shoulders tensed. No police, he whispered again. This isn't police, she said, voice even. This is proof, so no one can claim you are someone else. At someone else, Ethan's eyes went distant. A woman said it, he murmured. It's not him. The doctor paused. Tell me. Ethan swallowed, his hands clenched on his knees. Bright light, he said. Someone crying, a man, and a woman saying it like she hated the words, like she wanted them to be true. The doctor nodded slowly. Memory returns in fragments, she said, especially around trauma, but DNA will speak clearly. We went home and waited. Waiting felt like an old habit. I had waited 15 years already, but this waiting was different. This time my son was in my house. He was real. He ate soup at my table. He slept under my blanket. He also startled at sounds. He tracked doors. He flinched when Megan raised her voice, even in laughter. He watched my hands whenever I reached for anything sharp. On the second night, he asked me quietly, "Do you lock your doors?" "Yes," I said. "At night, because it's normal." He nodded as if storing that word. Normal. Then he asked, "Do you lock doors inside the house?" "No," I said carefully. "You can, if it makes you feel safe. But no one here will lock you in." He stared at me, eyes hard. "People say that," he whispered. "Then they get tired." "I won't," I said, and I meant it so fiercely it scared me. He studied my face, and then, slowly, he nodded once, not convinced, but willing to wait. When my grandchildren came over, they were quiet at first, sensing the gravity in the air the way children can. Caleb, 10 and stubbornly brave, stepped forward with a drawing, a stick-figure family under a big yellow sun. At the edge was an extra figure with a question mark. "That's you," he said, pointing. "Mom says you're my uncle." Ethan stared at the paper for a long time. "Uncle?" he repeated. "Do you like fishing?" Caleb asked. Ethan's eyes flicked to me, then back. "I think I do," he said cautiously. Caleb nodded like that settled something important. On the fourth day, the doctor called. I answered in the kitchen, and her voice was careful. "Thomas," she said, "the DNA confirms it. He's your son." My knees went weak. I sat down hard at the table. Megan, watching my face, covered her mouth as tears spilled. I walked into the living room where Ethan sat staring out the window at falling snow. I sat across from him and said, "It's official." He didn't move. "The test says you're my son," I continued. "No one can argue it." He turned his head slowly. His eyes were wet, but his face was tight, controlled. "So I'm me," he whispered. "Yes," I said. "You're Ethan James Harper." His mouth trembled. "That name feels heavy," he admitted. "It's yours," I said. "You don't have to carry it all at once." He pressed his palms to his eyes. His breathing shook. Then he asked the question that opened the next wound. "Where was I?" he whispered. "All that time?" I didn't have a clean answer. Not yet. But answers began to arrive the way thaw arrives, slowly, with cracks and sudden slips. Because once we had DNA, we had a place to start. Records could no longer shrug. We contacted the state missing persons unit, not with sirens and drama, with phone calls, forms, signatures. A social worker helped us navigate what the world requires from a man who has existed but not officially lived for 15 years. I sat at my table with a folder of old reports. My hands shook as I turned pages. Then I found a line that made my blood run cold. 15 years ago, a rescue team had found a teenage boy alive near the edge of the search zone. Hypothermic. Confused. Head injury. Transported to a hospital in the next county. No ID. Could not clearly state his name. The report said, "Identified by family member. Released into their care." Identified. Not confirmed. I stared at that word until I couldn't see straight. Megan leaned over my shoulder reading. "So someone took him," she whispered. "They thought he was theirs," I said, voice hollow. "Or they convinced themselves." Ethan stood in the doorway listening, face pale. A woman said, "It's not him," he whispered, and this time the memory sounded sharper, like it had teeth. We learned that another teen had gone missing in that same storm, in a nearby area. That family had been in the hospital too. A mother desperate for a miracle, a father exhausted and shaking, a nurse with a clipboard asking, "Is this your son?" I could see it. Chaos. Hope. A boy with amnesia on a bed. A family grabbing the first shape of salvation. But the paper trail showed more than a mistake. There were transfers, placements, a juvenile facility, a psychiatric unit for behavioral issues. Another placement. The name in the file did not match my son's birth certificate. It matched the other missing boy's name. A wrong identity stamped onto my child's life, defended by institutions that prefer consistency over truth. Ethan listened as we explained in plain words. He didn't rage. He didn't cry. He went very still. "So I was trapped," he said quietly. "Yes," I whispered. "And you were looking for a body." The bluntness hit like a punch. "I was looking for you," I said. "I just didn't know where the world had filed you." That night, Ethan woke screaming. I ran down the hall and found him barefoot, breathing hard, eyes wide, not seeing the room. "No!" he panted. "No! Don't put me back! Don't put me back!" I raised my hands, palms open. "It's me," I said. "You're home. You're safe." He swayed like the floor tilted. He gripped the doorframe with white knuckles. "I can't go back," he whispered. "You won't," I said. "No one is taking you anywhere." His eyes flicked to the locks, the windows, the corners. Slowly his gaze found mine again. Then, in a small, broken voice, he said, "I remember the leggings." My throat tightened. "Tell me," I whispered. "I was climbing down," he said, voice distant. Snow was deep. My foot went through. My leg got caught. The fabric snagged. I panicked. I pulled and it tore. I thought if I didn't get free, I'd freeze right there. He swallowed hard, eyes unfocused. "I got free," he whispered. Then my head hit a rock. I saw sparks. I remember thinking my fingers were gone. And then, white. Tears slid down my face. "I never stopped thinking about those leggings," I admitted. Ethan's mouth trembled. "They were just pants," he whispered. "They were the last thing the mountain gave us," I said. "So we turned them into a whole ending." Ethan sank onto the bed, trembling. I stayed in the chair across from him until his breathing slowed. The next weeks were not a clean healing story. They were messy, uneven, real. Ethan learned small freedoms. The pantry door didn't need a key. The shower could happen anytime. Food didn't have to be earned by obedience. He could sleep without listening for footsteps. He also learned that the world had moved without him. He stared at my phone like it was impossible. He watched Megan show him photos of her children growing. He listened as she spoke about weddings, funerals, promotions, heartbreaks. Sometimes he would get quiet and vanish behind his eyes. Sometimes he would snap, angry at nothing, then look ashamed. A therapist came into the picture, a steady man with gray hair and a voice that didn't rush. Ethan sat stiff at first, speaking in short phrases, like each word cost him. After the third session, Ethan told me, "I said I feel like a ghost wearing someone's skin." "What did he say?" I asked. Ethan stared at the countertop. "He said ghosts are proof something mattered enough to haunt." That line stayed with me, because my house had been haunted by my son for 15 years. Now the ghost was alive, and we had to teach him he was allowed to take up space. Paperwork became its own battlefield. A man cannot simply reappear and be treated as a person. There are forms. There are offices. There are clerks who smile and then ask for identification a missing person cannot have. I went with him everywhere, not hovering, not smothering, just present. A father with his hand on the small of his son's back, guiding him through fluorescent hallways and waiting rooms. At the DMV, a clerk asked for a previous ID. Ethan's jaw tightened. His breathing changed. I leaned in and said quietly, "We have the DNA results. We have the birth certificate. We have the case number. You are not invisible." He looked at me with a flash of panic and something like gratitude, then nodded. At the Social Security office, a security guard's uniform made Ethan stiffen so hard I thought he might bolt. Megan moved closer, her voice calm. "You're okay," she whispered. "He's just standing there." Ethan swallowed. He didn't run. That was a victory no one in the building understood. Slowly, a new identity was built from old facts. A replacement card, a corrected record, a fresh set of documents that did not erase the lost years but acknowledged the person who survived them. And then came the hardest work, living. Ethan started taking walks with me. At first, only around the yard, then down the road, then into town, where he scanned faces and shoulders, reading for danger. One day outside the grocery store, an older man approached, cautious, eyes wet. "Tom," he said, "I heard about your boy." Ethan froze. The man looked at Ethan and said simply, "I'm glad you're back." He didn't ask questions. He didn't demand a story. He just offered the sentence and walked away. Ethan watched him go, then turned to me. "Is that what people do?" he asked. "They just say things?" "Sometimes," I said. "Sometimes they mean them." He stared at the ground. "Sometimes," he repeated, as if testing whether the word could be trusted. In April, I found Ethan in my garage staring at a shelf. On top of an old tackle box sat a small wooden fish, painted blue, with a crooked smile. Ethan had made it in 6th grade and given it to his mother. After he disappeared, my wife kept it on the mantel like a talisman. After she died, I moved it to the garage because looking at it felt like being stabbed. Ethan reached out and touched it like it might vanish. "I made this," he said. "Yes," I whispered. "You did." "I remember the paint smell," he said, voice thick. "And I remember being proud." "You should have been," I said. He laughed softly, real and small. "It's ugly," he said. "It is," I agreed, and for a moment the air felt lighter. That night, he sat at the table with Megan and the kids and played a card game. Caleb cheated badly. Lila giggled too loud. Ethan watched them like he was learning a language. At one point, Lila leaned against him without thinking. Ethan froze for a heartbeat, fear flashing across his face. Then, slowly, he put an arm around her shoulders and let her stay. I looked away because my eyes were burning. May came. Ethan's birthday came with it. But it wasn't a celebration in the normal way. It was grief wearing a party hat. We made cake anyway. We lit candles anyway. We sang anyway, voices trembling. Ethan stared at the flames like he was facing something dangerous. "Make a wish," Caleb urged. Ethan hesitated. Then he leaned forward and blew the candles out in one steady breath. Smoke curled up, thin and gray. "I wished," he said quietly. "What?" Megan asked, smiling through tears. Ethan looked at her, then at me. "I wished I can stay," he said. My chest tightened so hard I had to swallow twice. "You can," I said. "You are." He nodded, eyes shining. He didn't wipe the tears away like he used to as a boy. He let them exist. That summer, Ethan got a job. Nothing dramatic. Part-time maintenance at the community center. Fixing doors, painting walls, clearing gutters. Honest work with clear rules. The first day he came home, he held his paycheck like it was fragile. "They gave me this," he said, stunned. "You earned it," Megan told him. Ethan stared at the paper, then looked at me. "I feel normal," he admitted, as if confessing a secret. "There's nothing wrong with normal," I said. He nodded slowly, storing the statement like a tool. There were still hard nights. Some nights he paced the hallway because sleep felt dangerous. Some nights he woke sweating, eyes wild, whispering, "Don't put me back." And I would sit in the chair across from him and remind him, over and over, that the door to the house opened outward, that he could leave if he wanted, that no one would stop him. And each time, he would breathe a little easier. In July, we went back to the lake. Not to fish, just to stand on the shore and look out across the water that had given me my son back. The surface glittered. The air smelled like grass and warm earth. The trees were thick and green, nothing like the skeletal winter line. Ethan stood with his hands in his pockets, staring out. "This is where you found me," he said. "Yes," I whispered. He swallowed. "Why were you there?" he asked. I stared at the water. "Because I didn't know what else to do with my grief," I admitted. "And because I never stopped listening for you." Ethan's eyes went glassy. "I was near here," he said quietly. "In the woods. In sheds sometimes. I don't know why I stayed close." I turned to him. "Maybe you did know," I said softly. "Maybe your body remembered what your mind couldn't." He nodded once, slow. After a long silence, he said, "When I first saw you on the ice, I thought you were going to hurt me." The sentence hit me like a bruise. "I know," I said. He swallowed. "Then you said a name," he continued, voice rough, and it felt like a bell in my chest, like something ringing in a place that wasn't dead. I exhaled shakily. "I said that name every day," I admitted, "even when no one could hear me." He stared at me. Something softened in his expression. "I'm here now," he said, like a vow. "Yes," I whispered. "You are." In autumn, we went to the cemetery. Ethan stood in front of his mother's stone for a long time without speaking. The wind moved through the trees. Leaves fell soft and slow. "I don't know what to say," he whispered. "You don't have to," I told him. He knelt, placed his palm on the cold granite, and whispered, voice breaking, "I'm here." Megan cried behind us, silent and shaking. When we walked back to the car, Ethan's face was pale, but his eyes had a steadiness I hadn't seen before. That night, he sat at my kitchen table and wrote his name on a piece of paper over and over, careful, as if practicing a skill. Ethan James Harper. He looked up at me. "It feels real," he said. "It is," I said. He nodded and kept writing, like each repetition stitched him more firmly into the world. In December, 1 year after the lake, we had Christmas at my house. The tree was up, the stockings hung. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and roast. Ethan sat on the floor with the kids, helping them assemble a toy. His hands moved with patient competence, guiding small pieces into place. He looked concentrated, not haunted. At one point, Caleb looked up and said, "Uncle Ethan, can we go fishing when the ice comes back?" Ethan froze for half a beat. Then he looked at me. I nodded. Ethan turned back to Caleb and said, "Yes, we can go." Caleb grinned. Lila leaned against Ethan's shoulder and sighed, content. Ethan swallowed hard, and I saw his eyes shine. Later, when the house quieted and the fire burned down to coals, Ethan and I sat together without talking for a long time. Finally, he said, "I still don't remember everything." "I know," I replied. "And sometimes I'm angry," he admitted. "Not at you, not at Megan. Just at the missing." "That anger belongs," I said. "It's part of what happened. We just don't let it decide who you become." He nodded slowly. Then he looked at me with a seriousness that made him suddenly look older than 29. "I want to learn," he said, "how to drive, how to pay bills, how to be in the world without feeling like I'm trespassing." "We'll do it," I said. "One thing at a time." He held my gaze. "Thank you," he said, quiet but solid. "You don't thank me for being your father," I said. He blinked, eyes bright. "I'm thanking you for not giving up," he whispered. I stared at my son, alive in my house, and my mind flickered through the old winter like a film reel. The storm, the ravine, the torn leggings, the searchlights sweeping trees, the empty bed, my wife's porch light burning until dawn, the way grief turned our family into people who laughed carefully. Then I looked at Ethan sitting by my fire, and I understood something else. We never got the years back. We never got the boyhood he should have had. We never got the ordinary moments that were stolen. But we got this: a man learning to live in his own name again. Outside, snow began to fall, soft and steady, covering the world in clean white. Inside, my son sat by the fire in a room that belonged to him, in a life that was finally allowed to be his. And for the first time in 15 years, the hole in the world did not feel bottomless. It felt like something that could heal.